Hi there, welcome back. In previous lecture, we talked about the discovery methods and boundary groups. Now, in this lecture, we will be focusing on a client installation. So to install the client, you have a multiple options that are available. So if you could see here, there are close to 6 different methods that you have. So starting with the client push. Client push is something like, the push meaning itself, like, you push it. You push maybe, your volleyball or basketball, you're just pushing, right? Similarly, with this, you push the software, whether it is going to reach and whether it's going to install or not, that's a secondary part. But you are actually pushing the software. So mostly it gets success if at all it is meeting the pre-requirements that we need to configure. So this is the completely automated method that you could be using it. So you could push only to the workstations, or you could only push to the servers. Such a way you could, configure with an exceptions that you could also exclude domain controllers or maybe a SCCM servers. Or you could even exclude the server operating system. That's how you could push it. So that's called the push method, which we are gonna look into it throughout this course. Definitely we would be using all of these methods, but before that, we would be focusing within this video manual installation, give you an idea what are other options that you have. So you also have something called the software update point based installation, meaning software update point is the nothing but we also call it sometimes as a SUP, software update point, which will be used for patching the servers, right? So the WSS server, hopefully, right? So the same WSS server is going to work as the client installation related also, with some kind of group policies to be configured so that the software also gets automatically installed. When it's a software, client software gets updated, we call it as a config.mgr client, or you call it as a CCM client, it doesn't matter. At the end, it's a software, a client software which will connect to your config.mgr server. Okay, so that is the method you would be using. In this method also, you would configure some kind of group policies for the software update point based installation. Now when we talk about the group policy installation, as the name suggested, you would be configuring some kind of group policies, and by using that group policies, you would automatically deploy the client software. So within the group policies, you also have something called a logon script based installation. So as soon as the user logs in, automatically the trigger would happen, the installation command. And the manual installation, which the name suggested, you would be installing manually within a command line option, which we would be doing it. And apart from this, after the co-management capabilities, you can also deploy directly from Intune. Let's say you are managing some of the devices with Intune, and you wanted to install config.mgr client. You should be able to do it by creating a package within the Intune portal and target to all the Intune client machines, so that they can have the SCCM client. So what would happen ideally, you could manage from your Intune as well as from SCCM. For that, you need to do little bit of the configuration changes for the co-management specific workloads to be done. But at the end, for different methods what we have here and different software binary, that's a starting binary, you might have to use it. For example, for client push, you don't do anything. Okay, you would be simply taking some kind of check boxes, it would automatically pushed. But software update point, you need to configure group policy. Along with that, the source would be different. Same thing goes to the group policy installation. You would be giving some kind of MSI. With that, you should be installing. But whereas a logon script or manual, you would be actually ideally using the CCMSETUP.exe file. So that's a exe file you would be using. Of course, with the Intune, you should be using multiple options the way you are going to package it, but mostly it would be .exe file. So now we know the methods that we have, and we are going to deep dive with the complete demo with the manual installation. Starting with, if you navigate to config.mgr server or your SCCM server, wherever you install the config.mgr, within that drive, Under program files, you have a Microsoft Configuration Manager, and within this you have a folder called client. So within this client software or the folder, you have all the client installation files are available. So this is coming close to 590 or 60 plus MB. However, you don't need all of that files. You just need single file called CCMSETUP.exe. So this is the one command or the exe file you would be using to install client software. If you're that is for the manual option, okay? And if you're trying for GPO kind of thing, then the different client installation method, different MSI files we will be using. For now, I would be running for the manual installation. So all I need is the simple file. So all I have to do is I have to copy this file and keep it ready on one of my client machine. So if I have this file, I should be able to install config.mgr client software. Just in case if you're looking for the command line options, so you could see here CCMSETUP.exe, and which has lot of other parameters that are available. You could simply get it by using /, and you would be able to get it multiple options like the MP name, or you could say log on, no URL check. All are different commands which are available. You could also skip some of the pre-requirement files by using the skip prereq checks. And the installation commands are different based on the requirements. When I say requirements, for example, this is with the MDM based installation method, you would be using this kind of options like client setup.msi with CCM setup CMD with the options. So we would talk on these additional command line options as we proceed further throughout this course or throughout this playlist. You would definitely find out, my friends. For now, all you need is you need to know how to install a basic client a command line, okay, very basic command line. After that, we would be using enhanced command lines that we are going to build it based on the configuration that we are doing. For example, if you are installed or enabled a cloud management gateway, you might be using a separate command. If you are attached your cloud attach, then you might be using Intune for the co-management purpose. So you might use a little bit of different client package that needs to be created. We would deep dive all of these as we go through it. So this is the step-by-step instructions. So I don't want to make you to get it confused, right? So that being said, let's actually start one of the client machine and start installing the config.mgr client software. So that being said, let's actually open up the config.mgr site server share folder. So by default, there are a couple of share folders got created. If I talk about, for example, this SMS_lab, this is the folder that has shared with the installed directory of config.mgr. So within this folder, you have something called a client software or the client folder. So this is a single file what you needed. So you can copy it because we are doing manual installation. So in my case, I would create a simple directory called temp example. I'm just copying here the CCMSETUP.exe file. I logged in as the local administrator permissions with a domain account so that I can run it. So if you just look at who am I'm actually logged in with the administrator account of the domain. So you need to have a admin privileges in order to install the config.mgr client. So in this case, the exe file is located in C:temp. So I would be changing the directory in my case. So I would just zoom it for you for better comfort, and I would change the directory to C:temp, and this is a exe. So I would simply put /? This is going to bring up some additional options that are available. So these are the high level, very basic options that you might be using. For example, if you want to uninstall the config.mgr client or SCCM client, you should be using CCMSETUP.exe, the same exe file you would be using for installation as well as uninstallation. If it is an installation, you would click on /uninstall. If you want to install, you might have to specify the site code information. If you don't know anything, just like a basic person, if you are, just put it as CCMSETUP.exe and type it as SMS site code equal, you can give as auto, or you can give the site code of this machine. For example, you have configured your boundaries to associate with LAB server, right? So that also you could give it. Now what will happen, I wanted to explain this command by taking some time, because this is very important to better understand. There are a couple of command line options are available, but this is a simple command that makes the client installed. Okay, be as a simple to for the learner who wants to learn. Simply you could install with SMSSiteCODE equivalent, either auto you could give here, simply type as auto, or give the site code if you know it. Okay, so what would happen is, as soon as you actually call, whenever you're calling this file, that is a CCMSETUP.exe file, it actually creates a log file also. So let me show you the log file. So if you just go to the logs on the client machine, so this is the client, I would say, right? Because we're about to install the client. So within this machine, go to the Windows. There is a folder gets created automatically called CCMSETUP, and inside this, logs folder will be generated. So this is where a text file will be generated, and the logs, basically the logging would happen. But you, as you know, that we don't want to view in a notepad, we wanted to view with the trace tool. So as you know, the trace tool also will be available under the site code, that is SMS underscore, the site code is lab in this case. Within this tools folder will be there, right? So within this tools, you could copy the CM trace. So you can put it on your desktop or somewhere and double click, so that you should be able to view the .log file extensions by clicking on yes option. Let's go to Windows CCM setup, and you have a logs here. Within this is a log file. So right click, open with config.mgr trace tool. So this is what the log it says, because we use the command line called /?, and it has failed to get it, some kind of information it was throwing. So but you would be getting what is happening. So now I would be once I enter here as the auto, what would happen is it actually queries to Active Directory. So as soon as you specify auto, it will query to active. What is that Active Directory is? So you look at, I have opened the Active Directory. Okay, so within the users and computers, I have selected view, and then advanced features have selected. So click on system, and you see here systems management container. So within this container, now SMS-site-lab. So earlier this was not there when we installed the config.mgr. If you remember from the previous lectures, we talked about the extending AD schema, right? So when Active Directory schema was extended, it has created ms-site-site. So, and also if you see here, ms-sms-sitecode. So site code has been created, but the code was now populated. Okay, so let me correlate this. So you look at here, sms-site-code was populated. How it was populated? Because we installed the config.mgr. That's a SCCM server, and it has some permissions where we configured on a system management container. We configured to grant this machine has a full permission to this object and its child objects. We granted full control, so that what happened, SCCM server went, it queried as soon as it is installed. It has created this inside the systems management. It has used this template to populate the values. Same thing goes for your boundaries also. So these are the boundary information. Okay, so that boundary information also is going to come up directly from this template. Okay, so now why I was talking about this is because as soon as you type this auto as a command, it actually, the client, if it is a client, is part of your domain. Definitely this machine is part of domain join. It will go to Active Directory, and it will come here inside the flow I'm talking about. It will look for the site code, and it takes the last 3 digits, whatever it is. So in this case, it is a lab. Okay, so that's what it's going to happen. Let me switch back to the client machine. And now if I give as auto and hit enter, now the command is started executing in the backend. If you look at the log is actually starting all of that. Okay, but before that I wanted to explain one by one. It might take for me a couple of minutes to explain all of this log file, what is it is happening, all that story, but it will be very useful for you to troubleshoot in order to install the client. So you see here, this is a client name. We have mentioned command line as auto. So it is actually going back. So what happened? It has downloaded what it is downloading. If you read c:temp, this is a c:temp. Let's say c:temp. This is a file called CCMSETUP. That's where we executed. That file was copied. Download is nothing but a copy, right? Copied to c:windows CCMSETUP. So it has copied inside. So do you see here? Yes, you could see CCMSETUP.exe. And then once the download is completed, like this, it is actually executing the installation. So it is verifying, hey, do we have this folder? No, we don't have. We don't have a client related software is not installed, so there is no upgrade. It will continue, and then it has run as service, meaning if you go to services.msc, you might see a service called CCMSETUP. See, this is a CCMSETUP run as a service called SMSSiteCODE. I hope you are now able to read the log what it is, right? So why we are creating as a service is just in case if the machine got restarted unexpectedly for some reason by the user or anybody in the next whenever the next time the system starts, automatically it will try to reattempt to start this service and installation would automatically happen. Okay, now it is looking for the default ports, port 80 and 443, and then it is actually looking for a machine level certificate, and then it is querying. You can read, my friends, please pause here and read what it is doing, performing AD query. So I said, it will query to the Active Directory, right? So it is actually querying to the Active Directory for the boundary range. What is the boundary? It was configured. So if you remember, if I go back to my config mgr quickly and look at my config mgr boundaries, these are the boundaries, right? So these boundaries are associated with this boundary group called India region, and within India region I have configured SiteCODE to assign as a lab, and the content can be downloaded from this server. So this is what I configured on a server part. Now what would happen? Once it is queried, it will retrieve the information. Okay, it has retrieved or it has actually querying. When it is queried with the subnet, it might be retrieved some information saying that, hey, for this subnet, this is a site code. You see, lab is a site code for this subnet. Why? If you look at what is the IP config, I have here subnet as 192.168.31.0 as a subnet. So that's why this is the boundary, and this is a site code. So now it is accepting, hey, you have to accept instead of auto. This is a site code called lab. Now it will proceed further for attempting to query for MPs that are available for this lab site. How do you know what are the MPs are available? Again, my friends, just correlate with this configuration. If you remember in the previous lecture, I made it 4 different roles will be used when you configure here, right? One is a management point, distribution point, and SMP for your user profiles migration and software update point. These 3 will be actually pulling from here, meaning now this is the machine that becomes as a management point. Okay, you might have a more than one management point also, right? So it is just queried and site code assigned, and then it is actually looking further, and it framed the entire statement. Okay, it queried MP name also, and then it got the lab site name. It has successfully performed all of this step, and then here a command line has been found with the MP name retrieved as this. This is the MP name. How it is received or retrieved, please my friends, look at here. This is the name that we have given, right? So based on this, management point has been retrieved. Okay, now you know MP name, one MP only there. So as I said earlier, you can have more than one MP, one management point. There's no Azure Active Directory tenants. It could be your machine could be a hybrid AD. So in that situation, it will query to the Azure Active Directory also. So in this case, there is nothing related to the Azure Active Directory application ID, all of that stuff. If it's just little bit of advanced, I'm just talking about just in case if you have attached a cloud, cloud attached for co-management, it might be looking for this information too. Okay, now command line SMS site equivalent lab. So what happened from here to all these are I have actually made it to look at, right, my friends? Since I gave as auto in the backend, what happened I was explained. Now if you learn out of this video, subscribe to this channel. Subscribing won't cost you a coin, but it has extreme value to me. Subscribing may seem very small to you, but its impact is more on me. It's a vote of confidence that keeps me excited about creating more fresh, insightful content when you subscribe. Subscribing is a win-win situation. You ask any question or post any questions in the comments. As a new thread, you would be getting within 10 minutes a response back. Your support means the world to me. Thank you. Subscribe. Now from here it will actually frame the relevant command. You see here it says that port 88 will be used. Okay, this is where the MP list is available, meaning management point will be available on this machine. Now a little bit further it is looking here it checks for the some of the pre-requirements like the disk space is available and XML, VC++, all of that software. If it is not there, it would be definitely starts installing that software. Okay, so this is very nice information. You see here sending location request. So what do you mean by location? So location is where is this machine? So this machine is within this subnet range, within this Active Directory site, some site called Hyderabad, right? So that information it will send it. So it will frame that information based on the existing information. For example, subnet is this, IP address is this. Okay, all of that information. Then client is on internet. Client also has an internet connectivity and it can even install internet based client also. What I mean to say is, as I said earlier, when you're trying to install config mgr client, you might be using additional command lines. We used only simple command. There could be some other command that can be installed so that this client always communicate over the internet, meaning your SCCM server also will be available over the internet. For that additional configuration to be done with the additional certificates to be configured like server authentication, machine level, or client authentication certificate, all of that stuff to be configured, which we will be doing it as part of this entire series later point. For now, very basic one, but try to read that a client is on internet at this point of time, but there's no web proxy. Web proxy is nothing but over the internet. What is that? It is going to use that web proxy. Okay, so there's no CCM host specific. I will talk on that later point. So finally, it has looking for some of the softwares. For example, here not only the software. If you look at fallback to unprotected DP, if you remember, where did we configure this? Can anybody guess? Yes, we have configured under options the fallback options also, right? Just in case if it is falling back, you could always use these options from the relationships, right? So I could configure this just in case if this Hyderabad or India region specific boundary group is not working fine, then it will fall back to this locations also can be configured. This is what it was talking about within the command line. If you read, so all of that are fine. Now what is it is doing is it is actually querying to lab003. What is this? So it is nothing but, if you just try to understand, SMS underscore DP underscore SMS PKG dollar is nothing but a package folder which is available on config mgr server. So what would happen is, as soon as you install the distribution point role within the packages, okay, so let me take a minute and explain to you. SMS PKG signatures will consist of the packages information. So if I go back to the previous one, okay, which is in this case 003 lab, right? So this is nothing but this is the machine, right? So in this folder 003 is nothing but this, all the client related files are available, right? So it will try to download these files. So if you look at here, it's connecting to this package and it will start downloading as a next few steps. So within this, now CAF file is needed. So it is downloading CCMSETUP.CAF file from this location to C:/CCMSetup. So within this CAF file came, right? If you see CCMSetup, CAF file came. Similarly, all these relevant files get automatically downloaded. That's what this log says. So as you proceed further, now XML file got copied from here to here, okay, and additional information gets automatically downloaded. For example, from an i386 web view or some patches, some firewall configuration, firewall provider, VC++, all these are inside the i386, so that gets automatically downloaded here. Once it is downloaded, it will start installing. Okay, you might have a question, hey, I don't see here what happened. So some files, what it does is it actually puts inside this GUID. So if you see here, some files it would be putting here, some of them are completely deleted at the end of this installation, which are non-related. Okay, so don't worry about this red color at this point of time. It says that 100E says that it means that because I know that this says that you don't have that client software is basically installed. That's why it will show as a red color. Okay, don't correlate with that. So it is started installing, and if it does not found, it will try to download. So it is looking for this VC redistribution x86 and x64 files, along with that Microsoft policy platform, firewall configuration, client.msi. If these files are not found, it will download. So you see here, it is actually added to download by using bits service. So on every computer, background intelligent transfer service will be there. So this is a service. It will download the required contents automatically. Just in case if you don't know how to check the jobs, you could always run bits admin /list /all users, so that any jobs that are started, it would be listed. In fact, for us, there is no jobs because the installation is by this time it is completed for sure. I'm just trying to explain the in-depth content, what is happening. That's why it has taken some time, right? So it is just added to the bits job, so slowly it will download. So what is the advantage with the bits is, example, it is actually downloading this client.msi. Let's say this is 10 MB. In between 1 MB it got downloaded. User has been shut down the computer, and tomorrow he starts. It will continue from that 1 MB. After that, it will start downloading. So it will resume the job basically. So that's a functionality that you have with the added as an advantage with the bits, as it knows even the bandwidth also. Within the bandwidth, whatever the bandwidth available, it is not going to use full bandwidth. Instead, it will use some percentage of the available bandwidth only. So that's advantage, because that's why we call it as an intelligent service. So background intelligent transfer service. So it knows how to transfer better. Okay, it is just downloaded, and it will check for the hash file verification, and if file properly downloaded and in between it was not damaged by any of the virus, all of that, then it will start installing. Okay, so it is doing some kind of morph comp. So now you need to understand what is a morph comp is. WMI. So within the WMI, some kind of clauses, root, under root, WMI classes and attributes will be there. So all that information is getting compiled, meaning it is actually registering that information. Okay, once it is done, this entire process, at the end it will start deleting and it will create a service also. If you look at here, starting from here, it is going to start in as a service, meaning it has created a new service called CCMSETUP. So if I refresh this service, earlier we have this CCMSETUP.exe. So if I just double click, this service is not available because this was open during the installation. If I start refreshing, this will go off automatically. It's gone, CCMSETUP.exe. So as soon as the client is successfully installed, the service gets deleted and it will start creating a new service called SMS agent host. So if you look at here, SMS agent host service is available with the exe called CCMSETUP. So that's what it is talking about, starting CCMSETUP. So that's the service it has started. Okay, and if you look at the config.mgr client is installed inside Windows CCM folder. So all I have to go is now from here on, once the client is installed, I would refer to CCM folder, and all this are related to SCCM client related files. Out of that, there are logs will be there, close to 70 plus logs, 70 to 100 plus logs will be there. All these logs are relevant to your config.mgr client. So in my case, I wanted to know further run. If you look at here, so client is completely installed. Now it has created a GUID based folder, and it has sent client.msi. You might have a question why it has moved here is because if a client is corrupted for some reason, it will use this client.msi to automatically fix it. Okay, and also it has ran. That's it. That's what I wanted to cover here. And it is deleted and successfully deleted CCM setup service, which I said that CCM installation 1, and there is no update task exists, so it will do additional tasks. That's it. Okay, this is how the client gets installed. Now the question comes. Now you know the log very well. Now you might have a very basic questions, right? So where's the client is going to install? That could be one of the question, right? Now it is actually installing on a Windows CCM folder. You might have a question, hey, do I see anything on a program files? No, my friends, you don't see anything inside the program files. Instead, it will be Windows CCM folder. This is where the client gets installed. You might have additional easiest question would be, will it show in installed programs and features anywhere? No, it doesn't show anywhere as SCCM client is installed. Here you don't find it, but where do you find this? You would find inside the control panel under system and security. You would see here something called a config.mgr client. Just in case, if you're not in a view by category, if you're with a small icon, you would directly see here config.mgr as a client. So now I wanted to take this opportunity to explain further with this applet. So we call this as a control panel applet. So let me explain here. So this is the management point that is assigned for this client machine, and how this client is going to work is it is going to work by using this site code called LAB, right? And if you enable the co-management, it will enable here, and it would change all the time a different numbers like 8193, and different numbers would come up here based on the workloads that you are going to enable. Okay, now a client has a self-signed certificate, meaning you did not configure your configuration manager server with a certificates. Instead, you are using a enhanced certificate or a self-signed certificate. That's a problem, right? We're going to do that in the upcoming lectures. And next thing would be the version. This is the version we call it. You might be using 2303 version, but this is a client version. Okay, it won't show you as the 2303. Instead, it actually shows as this number. Okay, now let's go to the most important one, would be the site. So if you see here, lab is a site is automatically coming up here, and it is grayed out, meaning I do not open this with the admin privileges. So all I have to do is if I just configure settings, and if I have the admin privileges, I should be able to open this and say find site. What would happen if I click on a find site? It will again query to the Active Directory and get the site code, a right site code here. Let's say if I forcefully added some additional site code here like P01, it won't work. It would actually discover and it would populate this value. And you might have, what is this? DNS suffix. This is used for your internet based clients you would be using, or your cloud management gateway. If you're using, you might be using these things, and we would be working on these advanced concepts later point of time, because during the client installation we would supply some additional command to query to your internet SCCM server, or to query to your cloud management gateway, which is a new feature from a config mgr. We would use those commands here so that it would query there and it gets that policy, all of that stuff. Okay, now when we talk about these things, these are the features that are currently enabled and available to us. So you might have here more. How do you have is, you might be configuring more settings, then more options will come up here. Just to give you, these action tabs are nothing but here components. So we talked very detailed in the previous lectures for SCCM server specific components. Similarly, even client machines also have some additional components. You know that from a SCCM point of view, all these are the components, right? Similarly, on a client machine, you have a different components. So if you see here, hardware inventory agent, you heard right, software distribution agent, software inventory agent, software metering agent. What does it means is, actually this software we install is the config mgr client. It's a combination of multiple agents. You see here, the multiple agents and multiple components are available. It's not a single software in my point of view. So in my point of view, why did I say is, sometimes my on one of the client machine, only hardware inventory agent might be corrupted. Rest of the agents are working perfectly. So in that time, you might have to repair in order to fix that problem. So these things only possible, and you should be understand what are the agents that we have enabled. Based on these agents, for example, hardware inventory agent is enabled state, meaning this machine is ready to send the how many processors it has, how much RAM, what is a disk and model and hard disk space, all of that called a hardware inventory, right? This information it can send, but it has to be configured some kind of policy. So based on that policy, it will send. Let's say if I configured in my config mgr server example, this is where you would be configuring client specific policies. So under default client, you never use the default, always try to create your custom policy. But I wanted to show you one and the same. Of course, all these settings you can also get it created with a new one. So in my case, hardware inventory server will request every 7 days once the client has to send inventory information. What if I want to right away? As an end user, or you might be troubleshooting, you want it to send immediately, then you can go to the actions, select that agent or the action that you wanted to perform. For example, I wanted hardware inventory cycle to be triggered now. That's it. What happened? It has triggered the hardware inventory cycle now. Okay, so if you want me to ask, hey, do I have any logs? For every component that you are seeing, for every agent that you are seeing here, you have very detailed logs. So where does the logs will be there? Logs will be under C colon, Windows, CCM. You have a logs folder. So just double click on the logs. All these are the logs. As I said earlier, 7,200 and plus different log files gets created. So now I initiated hardware inventory. So hardware inventory specific log file is inventory agent.log file. So this file is automatically generated and it has completed also. Let me show you now what would happen as soon as I trigger hardware inventory. So immediately it is querying with the 01. That's the location, that's the query for hardware inventory, I would say. So it is just querying and it is setting a file to collect under C colon Windows CCM inventory temp folder. So let's go to the temp folder. Do we have CCM inventory? So there is a temp folder. So this is where a file gets created, a temporary file gets created. As soon as the inventory is completed, it creates one file just like this. Earlier we said completed, right? So you see here under temp, this is a file got created as a XML, and this file will send back to your config mgr server, and that server will read this XML format file and it will write into the database. So that database will have this machine specific inventory information. So that's how it actually works. Inventory specific information. You see here what it is happening. So it has actually querying to the WMI for all these attributes information. So better to explain for you would be, this is the one. So it is actually querying for the BIOS version, build number, description, manufacturer, name, release date, serial number of the BIOS, and all of that information it is actually querying, man. So that's what it is doing in the back end. Okay, so as soon as it is done from the temp location, the XML file got created and it has sent even, okay, in a couple of minutes. So this is just an example of the how and what happens in the backend. So if I talk about as soon as the client is installed, what would happen? That's a very important one. We don't want these troubleshooting point of view right away. Let's first understand, as soon as you trigger the SCCM client installation command, what would happen? Client gets installed, right? So as soon as client is installed, there is an additional log file that you need to look at called ClientIDManager.startup. So let me open up this. So what happens is, I'll just go here, look at here, it is querying again, and this is the serial number of your BIOS, okay, and then it is triggering, and finally it will actually try to generate. Let me zoom up a little bit. So this is the serial number, all of that, a unique information of the computer hardware related, and then automatically it will send specific GUID specific. So if you see, GUID is a good ID, we call it, right? So with this, it is sent for a client registration is pending. What does it mean? A pending is actually in the backend, what happens is, in a client machine under C colon Windows, SMSCFG.ini file gets created. You look at this. This is the configuration settings file. So within this file, all details SMSCFG.ini. So you look at the, earlier we talked about all this stuff, right? So this information actually it will put it here, okay, and it will try to communicate with the SCCM server. So there is a good ID. So good ID gets generated for this machine. So by using this 138813FA good ID, this is a 13881A, this good ID based information sent to server for approval. So you see pending. What does it mean pending is, it actually client has to send that, hey, myself, I'm so and so client, can you please approve? That's how it has to send. So if I just go back to all systems, as soon as a client is installed, it has to report here as a client is YES. Yes has to come. How is it is actually pending also, sometimes it comes. Client is no, for example, for these machines, but this machine as a client is installed as a yes, but client you might have to approve it manually. Why? There could be a duplicate, right? The GUID, the same GUID, just in case if you think that this it has a different GUID, that's why it is approved. Otherwise, it would automatically resolve the conflicting settings. So if you just go to the hierarchy settings, you have here an option for client approval configuration. You can see, so this is where the client approval is automatically done, because this is a Active Directory integrated, Active Directory specific domains are available. If you choose the manual, client will come up. Even though you install the client, you must have to come and right click and approve. Then only the client can accept it, meaning client can retrieve the policies, all of that, or automatically approve all kind of computers. This is recommended. Of course, you're showing as a non-recommended, and I'm saying as a recommended. When it is recommended is the recommended when you are doing the work group clients. So you're working with the work group clients, then all of the machines are work group, then you might have to configure this as the all kind of things can be approved. Otherwise, you could manually approve it. That's also possible. Let's say if you have very few of them, then you could approve manually. So these are the additional things that I wanted to cover, right? So we have found the good ID specific, and then after a couple of minutes the server will approve it. Okay, so once it is approved, it will start retrieving the policies, all of that. So if you see here, the client is now registered. Earlier it was pending, now it has registered. As soon as it is registered and assigned, client ID is accepted with the approval state of 1, meaning then other component starts installing. So all other logs will just try to install or try to start it, because it has approved. Client is approved, so hardware inventory agent, software inventory agent, all of that agents gets becomes as active. Okay, now let's also look at some additional logs which are more important. So let me show you a couple of logs like location services. So if I look at the location services log file, it actually talks about my Active Directory. So this is a GUID, right? Once a GUID is successfully approved, it is actually retrieving from site code from Active Directory. Okay, and the current Active Directory, when it is queried to Azure, to the Active Directory site name, it retrieved as a Hyderabad. If you're referring what is that site name, so just wanted to explain for the persons who missed out maybe previous lecture. So this is where the Hyderabad Active Directory site got created, right, in the previous lectures. So this site, it was retrieved by querying to Active Directory by this client, and then this Hyderabad as the AD site name was configured with a boundary with the site code. In this case, Hyderabad is boundary has configured with this boundary group India, and within this India region, so this is the India region, right? So within this we are giving the site assignment and management point, and DP can be used this server. That's why client now can communicate with the by using the site code, all of that, it would start communicating it. So that's why it is retrieved the management point information, MP information, all of that, and that's how it's gonna proceed further. Okay, so I hope it is useful for you to understand about the client location. Similarly, location services log also will be there. So it will retrieve the management point information. Okay, and client location we talked about it earlier, and location services we did talked about it. What else is pending is the main one is a client ID manager. So look at if a client is not at approved, look at this log file fast. It will tell you what is wrong. Okay, and I hope we have done everything. Let's also look at from the GUI base. So let's actually talk about the basic thing. So if you look at a start button, is there anything comes up? Yes, you get the software center. Okay, if you look at config mgr, Microsoft config mgr is the folder that gets created. Within this, software center will be there. If you are working with the older version, you might be having system center configuration manager, or maybe endpoint manager, configuration manager, something like that. But this is the latest one. You might have something to do with the software center. This name doesn't change. However, the software center can be modified according to your requirement, the look and feel. For example, the IT organization name or the brand logo, all of this has to be customized. And if you want to install an application as a client point of view, if the applications are available, then it would be listed here. Okay, if the software updates are available, and you have targeted from a server point of view to this machine, it will be listed here. Similarly, if this machine is Windows 10, you want to upgrade to Windows 11, you might have configured some task sequences, it will be listed here. These are the client-side UI with the Software Center. Now, when we look at the console point of view, you have here a green tick mark, but this green tick mark is not available for other machines. The reason is these machines are not client. You might see sometimes this green tick mark becomes as a gray, meaning the client machine is in an offline state. So if I just stop that machine for a couple of minutes or maybe shut it down, then this will show as the gray color. It doesn't affect it as soon as the machine is online. The service becomes as online and it will try to contact its management point for the assigned policies. So this is all about the manual installation for Configuration Manager client.